on the subject of Sheriff Nanos and the latest reporting, this is what I wanted to tell you. He said that specialists in cloud-based video systems at Google are working feverishly to extract more information from the cameras. That's good to hear. Specialists in cloud-based video systems at Google are working feverishly to extract more information from the cameras. So it may be that the FBI doesn't have more images that it hasn't released to us. It may be they don't have more, but Google is searching for more and that we may still get more. He goes on to say, quote, I just hope they can scrape a camera shot down to the driveway to identify a vehicle because my goodness, you can't put a mask on a vehicle, right? So that's very interesting from the sheriff that they do believe that Nest camera in the front, and who knows, maybe even in the back. He's been tight-lipped about what might have been around that back door. Maybe they caught additional images. And I've heard some speculate about why was that intruder so determined to cover up the Nest camera when he was covered head to toe? And he's like staring right into the camera as he shoves the vegetation. Like, who that's worried about the camera looking at him would, like, who would care? Because he already has a ski mask on and he's done his best to camouflage his identity. Well, what if it was that he knew he'd likely be taking Nancy out the front door because his car was there and he didn't want the pictures of Nancy being stolen to be on that Nest cam? Maybe that was his main motivation in covering up the Nest cam. We know that, well, we believe we know that she came out the front door because of the blood droplets. That's an interesting thought that this guy, he understood she was coming out the front door. That's why he had to cover up that camera. And if the FBI has pictures of Nancy alive, if Google can uncover pictures of Nancy walking out of that front door of her own free will, I mean, obviously under duress and possibly under the threat of being shot. We know that the intruder had a gun, but that's still something to know that she was at least alive when she exited, which remains a question, at least right now, without the videotape. So say a prayer for the geniuses at Google to find that needle in the haystack tape. We don't know when he successfully got the Nest camera off of its cradle. We know he eventually did it because it's gone. And the sheriff says, we don't have it. So somebody took it. My own bet is he tried to get the front one off. He tried to camouflage the front. He probably then went around to the back and he was able to get in the back door. And I believe that there was forced entry there based on Banfield's reporting. Now, it's probably back there that he figured out it's actually pretty simple to get that Nest cam off of its cradle. And once he figured out that one, he probably took the front one down, probably before he came through it with Nancy, is my guess, which means it would have been up for a little bit longer and there might have been additional photographs that could be quite helpful. Again, the sheriff says the specialists in cloud-based video systems at Google are, quote, working feverishly to extract more info. I bet they are, and you couldn't ask for a better team, honestly. And on the front of a better team, my reporting is that the FBI remains frustrated at the fact that they're not getting the first crack at the DNA analysis. And that leads me to the glove, or gloves, plural, that were found 2 miles away from Nancy Guthrie's home. I believe these are the two gloves that the New York Post was present for the discovery of that look identical to the gloves used by the perpetrator. Well, the FBI did something extraordinary over the weekend, and it put out a statement. We've talked about this in the Charlie Kirk investigation with Tyler Robinson and how frustrated people are that the FBI hasn't been saying more. And I said to the audience, the FBI they don't update you on cases. They let you sit and stew with nothing. So it's very rare for them to put out statements on their investigation. I believe the reason they're making an exception here is because we have a missing person who might still be alive, and she's believed to be in bad health and could be in a dire situation right now. So they're doing everything they can to keep people interested in the case and keep them updated on where things are. And they put out a statement on two gloves. Okay, they've all now said that the Fox News report that there was a glove inside of Nancy Guthrie's house is wrong. We told you that on Friday. But it is true that they recovered many, many gloves in searching the area around Nancy's house. But the two that they're most interested in right now are the two that the New York Post was there on the ride along for, or at least following law enforcement. I'm not exactly sure how they were there when they found it. Um, and the FBI has released a statement on the analysis of those two gloves, which is not being done by the FBI. It's being done by the Florida lab. And you remember from last week, there's been some consternation over that. Why aren't we using Quantico, which is the standard, the gold standard for lab analysis? Why are we using a Florida private lab that hopes and prays it will be certified as a reputable lab by the FBI lab at Quantico? Like, why wouldn't you go to the lab that is like the gold standard? No offense to the Florida lab, it's just nothing appears to be quite as talented and reliable as Quantico. And I certainly think the FBI feels that way. Here's the statement. The gloves found approximately 2 miles from the Guthrie residence in a field near the side of the road were packaged up by PCOS, that's Pima County, Office of the Sheriff, and sent overnight on 2/12, which was Thursday night. And they arrived at their private lab in Florida on 2/13, which was Friday. The FBI received preliminary results yesterday on 2/14, so they got the results on Saturday. This statement obviously came out on Sunday. And we are awaiting quality control and official confirmation today before putting unknown male profile into CODIS. That's their national database unique to the Bureau. So they say it's a man. Okay, that's something we didn't know. It was a man who was wearing those gloves, and those gloves do have DNA on them. And the analysis was performed by the Florida lab. And before the FBI uploads the results to CODIS, their national database that shows you all sorts of bad guys who are in there or suspected bad guys, you can take DNA now from people who are arrested, and of course, those who are convicted. They're awaiting quality control and official confirmation before they upload the results into CODIS. Then they write, the process typically takes 24 hours from when the Bureau receives them. And again, they said they got the preliminary results on Valentine's Day, Saturday, and it takes 24 hours from when they receive them to do this quality control. So ideally, at some point yesterday, they were able to do the quality control and upload it. They write, investigators collected approximately 16 gloves in various areas near the house. Most of them were searchers' gloves that they discarded in various areas when they searched the vicinity. The one with the DNA profile recovered is different and appears to match the gloves of the subject in the surveillance video. The wording of this is not perfect. The one with the DNA profile recovered. Now, we don't know if what they mean is the one pair recovered 2 miles from her home in a field is different from all these 16 others or 15 others, in that it appears to match the gloves of the subject, or if they mean one of the two gloves that we recovered in the field has DNA. Either way, it's kind of the same thing. They're saying that pair of gloves discovered in the field is much more interesting to us. They do appear to match in type, in look, in brand, perhaps, the ones that the actual perpetrator was wearing. And they're saying most of these other gloves are just discarded by searchers. And then they finish by saying the FBI has and will continue to provide assistance on whatever timeline is provided to us. Again, they're not running herd on this, and they're not getting the first crack at the DNA analysis, or possibly any crack at the DNA analysis. They're just waiting for the quality control on the DNA analysis, and then they're going to upload it into CODIS, which is the database of offenders, to see if it's a match. And then presumably they will also cross-reference to the DNA. This is the other most promising lead that was found in the Guthrie home. And the sheriff has told us now that they are looking, they have found DNA inside Nancy's house that does not match anyone, that does not match Nancy and does not match, quote, those in close contact to Nancy. All right, so they've collected that inside of Nancy's house, and that is now being analyzed. So they're trying to get a name on that stuff. It will presumably be uploaded to CODIS, as will the DNA from these gloves. And whoa, we're in business if we have a match from somebody who was inside the Guthrie house and had those gloves on. Boom, Bob's your uncle. That's what they're looking for, among other things. International disputes, inflation, rising national debt, digital currency. There's a never-ending list of reasons gold has risen over 700% in the last 20 years. And a never-ending list of reasons smart Americans diversify a portion of their savings into precious metals with Birch Gold Group. Gold can thrive during uncertainty, which is why it's a crucial part of a balanced strategy. It gives you peace of mind given all the events that could impact the U.S. economy. See if holding gold in a tax-sheltered retirement account is right for you. Birch Gold can help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. Just text MK to the number 989898 to receive your free info kit on gold. There's no obligation, just useful information. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, consider letting Birch Gold help you diversify with gold, so you too can have peace of mind regardless of the uncertainty. Text MK to 989898. Now, what will they do if there's not a direct hit in CODIS? Well, they may do one of a couple things. They may get a hit, first of all, from some distant relative of somebody who is in CODIS. That's possible. And that is how they caught Brian Kohlberger. He wasn't in CODIS, and nobody he knew was in CODIS, but a relative was in the private DNA data banks that are out there, like I think it was Ancestry.com. And normally, they are not allowed, the feds, to look in those, to do DNA matching against those. Normally, they're supposed to stick to CODIS. There is a button you can check when you upload your DNA into 23andMe. Well, they're gone now, but Ancestry.com or a company like that saying, I'm fine if you put me in the law enforcement database. Like if one of my relatives turns out to be a criminal, I don't mind if you catch them off of my DNA. That's, I think, what I would do. But in any event, I'm not in there. And I don't know, it's an interesting question. Like they're asking all the gardeners and so on to give DNA. And I think if I were like in this situation where I just happen to be in the home of somebody who's obviously a victim of a crime, and they said, can I please have your DNA? I think I'd give it. But I'm not sure. I'm not so big on like just giving my DNA over. How do you feel? Like if they were just like canvassing house after house saying, can I have your DNA? I think I'd say no. So you can't assume the worst when somebody says, I'm not giving my DNA, or when they say, I'm not uploading my DNA, even though I'm doing Ancestry.com, to be available more widely to feds investigating a crime. However, we learned in Kohlberger, this became a big controversy, that, remember, the defense made a big deal out of this, that apparently it's just policy. It's just a policy. It's not a law with these private databases that they don't share with the FBI. But like in an emergency, they might, or the FBI might just do it because there's not a law stopping them. And our understanding to this day is that that is what they did. That they got a hit on a relative of Kohlberger, or they didn't get a hit, and then they used the other database, and they got a hit that basically brought them to Brian Kohlberger's dad. And then what they did once they got the dad is they do genetic genealogy, and they bring in somebody like CC Goddess of this technology, where let's say they find a relative who is like 16 family members removed from the perp, and they can see it's got like a very, very distant relation to the perpetrator of the crime. Then you bring in a CC Moore who starts to do a family tree. Like, you know how some people do their family trees? And it's like, this is the mom, this is the dad, this is the child, this is the offspring, this is where they're from, this is who they married, here are the death announcements. Okay, here he's ruled out, he died, and so on, until you get to who lives in the Idaho area around the date this crime happened. Or now in the Nancy case, who lives in the Tucson area around the date of January 31st, February 1st. And that's how you start zeroing in on a suspect. CC Moore's been on our show. We've talked to her multiple times. She's a genius. And she actually made a comment about this limitation on databases and like what technically they're allowed to access. And here's what she said about what she'd be doing if she were Savannah Guthrie. She spoke to Brian Enton the other day, SOT 3.
despite the fact that over 50 million people have taken direct-to-consumer DNA tests, for law enforcement cases, we are limited to the 2 or 3 smallest databases, which is less than 2 million people. And I'm hearing a lot of misconceptions out there. People are saying they can use Ancestry, they can use 23andMe. That is not true. Ancestry, 23andMe, and MyHeritage, the 3 largest consumer DNA databases, have barred law enforcement's use. And there are 2 well-known databases, GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, that have agreed to work with law enforcement. And then there's a new nonprofit called DNA Justice that's much smaller, but it can also be used. And so those are the ones that they will have to work in, unless they can serve a successful warrant on the larger databases. Now, if I was Savannah Guthrie and her family, I would be begging management at Ancestry, 23andMe, and MyHeritage to allow the genetic genealogy profile to be compared in there, because it would be a much more straightforward and quicker identification that way. But so far, they've been very, very resistant to that, even though studies have shown that 91% of the public is in favor of using genetic genealogy to identify this type of criminal.
Okay, so that's back to what we were telling you, which is they're supposed to use like the public databases, but happen to know that, you know, if the case is extreme enough, they will move heaven and earth to get into the more commercial databases that have way more information in them. And she's saying if she were Savannah, she'd be demanding or begging the private databases to cooperate and pushing the feds to get a warrant such that they can access those databases. So hopefully they're doing that on all of this DNA. Now, Cece actually went on to describe how if the perpetrator here is Hispanic, and he may be, you know, we're not able to really tell with that ski mask on, but you certainly can't rule it out. You know, you can see that it's not an African-American man. You can see that, I think you can see that it's not an Asian man, but it looks to me to either be a white man or a Hispanic man. Even some people have disputed it's a man because he does look like he's wearing eyeliner, but that could just be a function of the bizarre Ring camera shot. In any event, here's what she had to say if the perpetrator is Hispanic.
Could they use it in a case like this?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I've been waiting for that to happen, just hoping that there would be DNA found that was not tied to any of the known individuals from the home, because that will solve the case if nothing else does. It's just a matter of time then. What is going to determine how long that takes is what population group that person is from. So if their ancestry is from Latin America and they have recent immigrant ancestors, it'll be much more difficult to identify that individual. So it could take a lot longer. We have a lot of those Hispanic cases, and they tend to take weeks, months, or years compared to somebody who has deep roots in the United States and primarily Northwest European ancestry.
So that's unfortunate because there's a very high likelihood this person is Hispanic. Just given the region of the country that it's in, a very high percentage of Hispanics in Tucson, given its proximity to the southern border. And the guy on the porch does look like he might be Hispanic. So, you know, it's unfortunate. It'll be harder, but it's not impossible. And I'm sure Cece Moore will be brought in, or somebody just like her, if they manage to get it. I mean, she's a national treasure. I thank God all the time that Cece Moore is a young woman. She's not 90, and hopefully will be around for decades more to help fight crime. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.